Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into an April Fool's edition of Pucks and Prosecco. But let me assure you, this show is no joke. I'm very excited to announce that I am joined in his official Pucks and Prosecco debut. Jesse Montano is a part of the show. Jesse, walk us through your wardrobe decisions for the day.
Well, I want to first say, when you said it's April Fool's, I was like, oh man, I'm about to get kicked off this show. This is all just
Psych!
an elaborate prank.
Emily Kaplan, come on
Yeah.
in. You're the real guest today.
But no, I was getting ready this morning and I opened my closet and my pink hoodie was just calling to me. And I said, I love this hoodie in general, but I said, if there's ever been a day to wear it, it's for my Pucks and Prosecco debut. I've never been more excited for an episode of a podcast meeting.
I can tell, honestly, the enthusiasm. You're always kind of golden retriever, but it was heightened today, and I'm excited for the topics we're going to be getting into. But it wouldn't be a proper debut if we didn't have real Prosecco, and you assured me that you're very good at opening this.
Yeah.
So
Should
Jesse
I tell everyone
is doing it live.
my little secret here about Prosecco that I get made fun of for a lot?
I mean, you kind of just volunteered it already.
Yeah, I guess I should. This is my alcoholic drink of choice. It started accidentally a few years ago. And for the longest...
Wait a minute.
All right, I guess we'll tell that story as well. We were in Mexico at an all-inclusive resort. If you've ever been to an all-inclusive, they water down the drinks.
Oh.
Well, this nice young lady in front of us ordered a Prosecco, and I watched them pop the cork on it. I said, well, you can't water that down. So I ended up drinking this for a week, and that's now just what I do.
Fave drink. And for a long time, I would hide it, would kind of be coy about it. Not anymore. People can make fun of me if they want. I was thinking back to the Winnipeg series, a lot of the Avs media in this sports bar with sports on every television, giant TV screens, and we're all going around the table putting our orders in. We've got some margaritas among some of the women that are there, some beer for the men that are there, and Jesse quietly, I think it was a sparkling rosé, maybe?
Yeah, it was.
I'm not sure they had a Prosecco option.
You're remembering correctly.
All right. That was a terrific night, because honestly, I ended up ordering that next because it looked really great.
Well, and so that's really the secret to all of it, Megan, is it always starts with people going, what, a Prosecco? Then when the wait staff comes back around, you usually get 2 or 3 others. Actually, can I get a Prosecco as well? And it's like, see, everyone just needed
to
someone,
follow their heart.
Right. Someone just to break the ice. The cork's already popped on this, so we'll finish this throughout the rest of the show.
Perfect.
I'll just keep filling yours up as you need.
Alyssa says, never let anyone shame you for Prosecco. I think that is a beautiful lesson today. If you lead with your heart, you can never go wrong.
I think that's never let anyone shame you for Prosecco. That's maybe the best life lesson you can have.
Well, Jesse, I'm so excited to have you
Me
on
too.
today.
Cheers. Thanks for letting me come hang out.
We've kind of, the Winnipeg series, in talking about it, Evan made a comment today at practice that the Avs' path to the Cup's kind of the same as it was last year, just a little bit flip-flopped, very likely. It is that weird time of year where the playoff scenarios for the Avs, the part that they can control is kind of done with. Obviously, they should go and win the rest of the way if they can do so. But it also comes down to now things that are out of their control in terms of what the other teams are going to be doing. And so it's not official, but it does look like the Avs will be seeing Dallas. And with how good the top of the Central has been, I'm not doubting that they'll also have to see Winnipeg again at some point.
It's funny, Mark and I were talking about the potential path. And, we were saying, Dallas and Winnipeg. And that was the first time I'd kind of said it out loud that I was like, oh, dang. Same as last year. Yeah. You and I had talked that I don't know, maybe it would be better for them to drop down into that top wild card spot and go through the Pacific. But, Megan, I'm actually going to lean on something that Nate told us in 2022 when they won the cup and it was determined it was Tampa. He said, I'm happy it's Tampa. If you want to be the best, you have to beat the best. And do I have an issue with this NHL playoff format? Of course. It's ridiculous that 2 top 5 teams in the NHL are meeting in the first round. But to Nate's point, hey, if you want to win the Stanley Cup, you're going to have to beat these teams at some point anyways.
Something else that I've been thinking about, because the topic for today's show, one of the big parts of it will be comparing the 2022 team to the 2025 team. How do they stack up? But something that stood out to me too was the quality of competition in the 2022's team path to the cup. Obviously, Tampa, a dynasty team trying for a third year. But I'm looking at Nashville and St. Louis and an Edmonton team that is objectively weaker than they are today, in my opinion. And so, in my opinion, the Avs' path to the cup this year would face tougher competition than the cup team had to. Though that team was so stacked, they made easy work of it. I don't doubt that they also would have been a powerhouse of a team if the 2022 team existed today. But I think this 2025 team really has their work cut out for them.
Well, I love that we're talking about this because I made mention to just some of the folks upstairs earlier this morning that let's say the Avs do, let's just hypotheticals. And really, I think you could say this of any team, Dallas, Winnipeg, in Vegas, any of these top teams that be potentially coming out of the West. Your Stanley Cup final could end up being your quote unquote easiest matchup of your run. And I just think that's it's funny when it works out that way, that you could end up going through the toughest part of your playoff schedule in rounds 1 and 2, and it gets kind of progressively easier from there. But yeah, I don't know. This is it's a really weird year. The salary cap, the flat salary cap has led to more parity than ever. And I think there's more teams that are all kind of in that, like, there's no like real bad teams in the playoff. Even the Blues. I know yesterday I said that I didn't think they were very good on the show.
Look, I still believe that. Despite the outcome last night and my frustration over then the last 2 games against the Blues being bad for the Avs. I still agree with what you said.
But there is the caveat of they do have Jim Montgomery. And, the Wild could get Kirill Kaprizov back. And they got Matt, but like just every team, especially in the West, I think once we see the cap start to move again, it'll shake back out to the way that we've seen it in the past. But there's just so much parity in the league that the path is going to be very difficult going through the West.
Yeah, that is kind of the tricky thing too. Going east to west, the disparity then of the competition at the top in the West, it's a little bit of a bloodbath, whereas it feels very different later in the podcast, depending on our time. I want to look around the league too about some of the teams with where they're currently at in the standings, some of the teams that are looking at wildcard spots, and even the conversation around the wildcard battle for East versus West feels so different. It feels like it's still so undecided in the West, but in the East, I think you can feel a little bit more confident about how that's going to shake out.
Well, and in the East, it almost feels like none of those teams want it. You know what I mean? Like it like they're just constantly like, you take it. We don't. As we're the West, it feels like there's, to your point, like there's like a real intense race to see who can win as many games as they can. In the East, it's just like, who's going to lose last? That's who's going to get in. And it's very different vibes between the East and the West this year.
Yeah. I don't know how to feel about it because I think I would take the Nathan MacKinnon approach of wanting to beat the best because it feels very iron sharpens iron to have the Avs play in the West and especially in the Central where I think it's been extremely competitive this year. I think that just makes the Avs a better team. And so I look at the games that have felt a little disappointing lately, whether it be the Montreal game, the Dallas game that they had within their reach, but then Dallas came back at the last minute, forced overtime. And now recently with this St. Louis game, there's something all of those teams have in common. They're in a position, either they are going to be a playoff team or they are making a strong case to be one for a wild card spot. And we're looking at tight playoff hockey, especially on behalf of those teams at this time of year. The Avs are getting everybody's best right now. And I think that's why I'm not entirely discouraged, but they do need to find a path through these teams too. I also believe they are made better after games like the St. Louis game.
Yeah.
I hope they feel a little disappointed with the end result. I look too, now
Even
Scott
last
Wedgwood.
night, even last night. Take a little bit of sting out of that too.
Yeah, no, I hope that one stings a little bit as well. I look like for Scott Wedgwood now, between the Ottawa game and last night's game, I feel was robbed of a shutout.
Yeah.
And so from the goaltending perspective, I think that this goalie tandem, we're going to get into it when we compare the teams, but this has been such a strong duo because had that been the case, it would have been a new career high for shutouts for both goaltenders now in the shortened season with the Avs.
Yeah.
And I think that's significant that they've both seen this elevation in play in joining the Avs, because the conversation around the team playing in front of them was, are they doing enough to support the goaltenders?
Yeah.
So this Colorado bump, we saw it in Georgiev's first year. I don't know that Blackwood and Wedgwood got the benefit of that.
Yeah. Go check out our interview with Scott Wedgwood.
Great segue.
But Megan, you asked him a question. We sat down with him for 30 minutes.
I apologized again.
Week. Did you?
He said, you already apologized. I like to talk. That was my fault.
But we chat with him for 30 minutes. And I mean, you and I were on the edge of our seats for every answer. Like, he was just so great. But where I'm going with this is, you asked a little bit about, I don't know if you necessarily used the phrase avalanche bump, but you asked kind of about this and you were like, what's the difference? And he goes, this team has the puck a lot more.
Yes. True.
And I thought that was such a funny response. But I think that it's, relative to what you're saying about, like, they maybe didn't get the same kind of bump that we've seen other goalies have. They haven't benefited from in the same way. I'm going to say something here that might come off like a little bit of a shot at people that have been here in the past. Like, I just think that both these guys came in as upgrades, like they brought them in as upgrades in net. And I think that they've just kind of chugged along here and been as advertised for when the Avs brought them in. And they didn't necessarily, like, when they brought in Georgiev, it was like, all right, well, we see the potential. Can we get him to the next level? With Kemper, hey, he's been there before. Can we get him back there? For these guys, it was like, no, keep doing what you're doing. That's why we brought you here. And so maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it through the wrong lens, but it feels to me like for those other guys that we've seen recently, even Grubauer, hey, we think you can step out of the shadow and be a number one. We've wanted and needed to see a bump in all those other guys. For these two guys that have come in, they were brought in with the intention of being a stabilizing force. And I think they've kind of done that.
Isn't it interesting too with how the year started in Nashville for Wedgwood, that people definitely didn't feel that way by the numbers, but similar to a Lindgren, whose play has been on the decline analytically the last two seasons, coming to Colorado, it's like it sort of removes that veil of what maybe was troubling the player on their former team, and you get a clearer idea of what they're capable of in Colorado. I think because they're well supported, that they're not trying to overcompensate in other areas, and I think it's just a matter of time before we see that for other players like Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle, who I think are later addition adds that it's a good thing we still have 7 games left in the season, in my opinion. Usually I'm gearing up for playoffs 2 days ago and I'm excited and I just want to get there. I think the Avs need these games and they need to use them as valuable learning lessons on a less important stage before they get to the important one.
I'm just going to take a quick 2-second side tangent on Ryan Lindgren. He made a couple plays last night with the puck on his stick. I thought he had a really good game last night. And had he scored on the play that I'm thinking of, he put the puck just wide, he would have surpassed his goal total from the rest of the season in New York in just the barely into double-digit games here in Colorado. And I just thought that stood out. As just interesting, again, given like what you mentioned with Wedgwood, the hesitancy that people had when Ryan Lindgren got to town. When I saw him make that move last night, I mean, it was a dynamic offensive play, and he put the puck just wide. I was like, oh, I would have loved for him to finish that, because that just would have been a really nice underscore on all of it. But I completely agree with you, Megan. I think we've seen this team been able to, and you could maybe even make the argument that they're in the position to again kind of coast down the stretch. Maybe you're kind of locked in to where you're at standings wise, more or less. But there's a lot to iron out here still if you're going to get to where you want to be by the end of June. And I think you got to take as much advantage of these last 7 games. Look, if the Avs went 0-7 in the last 7, but the process was really good and they were in tight games, I'm not as worried about the result right now as I am the process, what they're doing. And like Brock told you last night, the job right now is to close out games. Because when you get into the playoffs, it's going to be tight games that you need to close out. And I want to see them just start working on the fine details of all that.
Yeah, I look ahead to, and there are going to be teams that are trying to bolster their wild card bid or trying to play the role of spoiler. Every team can find a source of motivation, to include the Avs at this time of year. And I look back at the 2022 season, because they were such a powerhouse all year, I think of that regular season almost like a fairy tale. You know, you had players that were producing at career high paces, and the deadline was super successful for them. You know, Lehkonen came in and he was an incredibly easy fit into the Avs lineup and then proved to be a terrific fit in the playoffs. That's the other thing to account for too, is we didn't know Manson was going to be as huge as he was as soon as he got to Colorado. There were some ups and downs in his game in the immediate that prompted concern, but then he ultimately played a huge role in the cup run. And so I'm wondering what else is unknown about some of these new guys like Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle. And that's what I want to get into, because this year has not been a fairy tale for the Avs. No. So I have to imagine their source of motivation is so different from what got the guys excited in their cup year. I hope there is this sense of people thought we were the underdogs. We're inclined to prove them wrong. That the 7 different seasons inside the season that could have been distractions to us actually made us stronger. We're more adaptable. We're more versatile as a result of that part of our story.
I love you describing the 2022 season as, you know, like a fairy tale, because you dealt with injuries that year. But like we forget that there were, like, the Avs dealt with significant injury problems throughout the year. You know, that was the year that Gabe first had a cleanup surgery before coming back. Nazem Kadri breaks his hand in the playoffs. Andrei Burakovsky broke his ankle. Val Nichushkin shattered his foot. You know, they're like
something in Andrew Cogliano. I don't remember what thing, but I also felt like it was hand for him.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was,
but different from Kadri, who also broke his thumb.
Yes, he. I believe, in my memory serves me right, Cogliano blocked a shot.
Okay.
And it broke his hand, but I don't think he missed. If he missed one game, it was one at most. Or maybe he broke it in like a game, like at the end of a series, and was back by game 1.
That's what it felt like ahead of the Tampa series for some reason.
Yep. I think
similarly, Kadri was on a 100-point pace, but he had a little bit of an injury in season that stopped him from being able to fully realize that.
Yep.
And I only bring that up because it's going to be a part of our conversation comparing these teams side by side. But you look at some of the numbers that the top 6 of the 2022 team was putting up in the regular season, even with a couple injuries, you know, Landeskog, Kadri, it was still really productive.
Well, and it just felt like, you know, to your point of it being a fairy tale, there were injuries, but it just didn't matter.
Kemper played out of his mind in the regular season.
Yes, and he does not get enough credit for that to this day. People remember him getting stabbed in the eye by Avs legend Ryan Johansson. And you know, so people remember that he was a little bit shaky in the playoffs, but you're right, he was lights out in the regular season. And again, so like just any of the potential speed bumps just didn't really felt like they mattered. It felt like every game you went to, every game you watched, you expected that the Avs were going to win.
Yes.
And they usually did. This is a year this year where not that they didn't earn it in 2022. They earned every bit of that. But like this is a year where it's not as clear cut, and you're going to have to knock off some teams that people think are better than you. And I do think that there is a little bit of that. And if there isn't, someone needs to send this message of, hey, there's a lot of people that counted you guys out, thought you were done, questioned if you could even make the playoffs this year at times.
Had your ceiling as wild card team.
Right. And you guys are here. You're going to finish the year as one of the hottest teams over the last 6 weeks. And you're on paper one of, if not the deepest team up front in the NHL. Go prove everyone who thought you guys were down and out, window was closed. Go prove them all wrong.
Yeah.
Go prove them all wrong.
You know, I'm so glad to hear you say that. And I also want to invite everybody listening to start thinking of what the playoff slogan could or should be.
I thought you were going to say to open
year.
a bottle of Prosecco.
And I want all of you to open a bottle of Prosecco. That also isn't a joke. Nothing is a joke.
Non-company specific. And hey, if you have a Prosecco label out there, you're looking to get on a podcast, we have a spot for you.
It's perfect.
See, again,
spam calls, because I do ignore them, so I'm not getting so blown up. But Jesse entertained one spam call one time.
I let my wife bully me into answering a spam call, and now look where it got me.
It's a thing. Don't answer your phone, everybody. Life advice for Meghan. I don't answer my phone all the time, and look how I'm doing.
Yeah, you could have your own show about Prosecco.
Unbothered, but also a little out of the loop.
Are you getting the political text messages again?
Not a ton.
Not as much as I was in November, but they've started back up for me.
Yeah, I have been pretty strong in saying stop, and getting off whatever these lists that I'm on.
I should reply. I'm sorry. Playoff slogan.
See it through. I like that a lot.
See it through. Could you throw the comments up here? Just open
Caroline,
up the comments tab.
I love this.
Perfect.
We don't drink on every show, but this one felt really appropriate.
Yes, I agree.
The debut of Jesse. I know he briefly came on one time. Also, Chloe is on vacation right now.
Yes.
She will return to us soon, and we're gearing up for the final pyramid of the season.
Yep. Megan and I talked about it yesterday.
So we'll just wait until the end of the season and kind of make it a post-deadline pyramid and evaluate how we feel about the team ahead of the playoffs, which is kind of what we're talking about now. So I wanted to go line by line, comparing the 2022 team to the 2025 team, because
I love this.
Let's look at the regular season numbers just for a quick second at the top of the lineup. Mikko Rantanen led the team in points at the end of that regular season with 92, 36 goals, 56 assists. Nathan MacKinnon right behind him.
Let me pause you already. Nobody broke 100 points that season?
Nobody broke 100 points that season.
Wow. I remember a lot of weird anecdotes and facts about the 2022 Cup season for the Avs. I did not remember that they did not have any 100-point getters.
Which is, you can already see where I'm taking this conversation.
Yes.
Nathan MacKinnon, 88 points, 32 goals, 56 assists. 28 goals for Nazem Kadri, 59 assists, 87 points. Cale Makar, 86 points. Just so you know, Cale Makar's at 85 points right now. There's still 7 games. I think he'll surpass that easily, but it is pretty close to his points production in the Cup season too. Next behind that is Andrei Burakovsky. He was a player that I think people were worried about his production not being consistent enough in the playoffs. You know, his role was a little bit lower than we'd seen at points in the regular season, but he had a 61-point season, 22 goals. Landy, 30 goals, 29 assists, 59 points. 57 points for Devon Taves, 52 points for Val Nichushkin, JT Compher, 33, Alex Newhook, 33. I'll stop there because I'm trying to kind of paint the top 6 picture here. And then we can more broadly talk about the depth contributions too, because I think that's where it gets interesting. So the regular season number so far with 7 games to go. Nathan MacKinnon, 110 points. Cale Makar, 85 points. Here's where it gets a little tricky because of the Mikko Rantanen trade. Rantanen is still technically in his time with Colorado, 64 points. Arturi Lehkonen having a career high He came to Colorado and set new career highs,
Yep.
but he's doing that in this season. 27 goals for Artturi Lehkonen, 16 assists for 43 points. Devon Toews at 39. Jonathan Drouin, who missed significant time at the start of the season, 37 points. Casey Middlestat, 34. Val Nichushkin, another player who missed significant time, 30 points. Behind that, Ross Colton at 28 points.
What's Val's games played for this year?
37.
I was going to say, is it 37? Yeah, so pretty close to a point per game. Let me ask you another question that I know the answer to. So Nate had 32 goals in 2022?
Yeah, which kind of crazy.
What's he at right now?
Nate is at 30.
So that was a number that I found interesting a couple days ago when I realized that he hit 30 goals. I said, oh man, so yeah, his first 30 goal scorer. Now there's potential for them to end up with a couple more. But I said, geez, that seems a little bit down. But when you look back at the 2022 year, the year which Jared Bednar describes Nathan MacKinnon as maybe playing his most complete hockey ever, it's pretty comparable.
It is
Wouldn't
pretty
you say?
comparable.
Yeah.
And I really give Nathan MacKinnon a lot of credit for the way he built out his game in the playoffs, specifically in both ends. I don't think he earned enough credit for how well he played defensively in his own end. And where I see shades of that, and that being another possibility for him this year, is how he's dug in at the faceoff dot. This was maybe a part of the Avs' overall picture that they maybe didn't prioritize in the past. And I think there's a huge priority now with their play down the middle and winning some draws in games. And it's improved significantly now after the deadline. Now lines 1 through 4 a lot more solid, but Nathan MacKinnon individually electing to get better at the dot,
yes,
I think will make them better in their own end. Late D zone starts, Nathan MacKinnon digging in yet again. I expect that from him, and I imagine he's reached a new level compared to where he was even at in the Cup year. And I really want to drive that point home that I think the 2022 team was better than the 2025 team.
Yeah. Sorry.
But I think Nathan MacKinnon in 2025 is better than he was in 2022.
Ooh, wow. I love this take. And oh my God, what a day.
I'd like to nominate Blake Coleman for the Burn Book from Vaguely Sober with the super chat. I didn't get as heated in the moment, but I've seen the fan reaction to Blake Coleman being a little brat, and I respect it. Yeah, put him in the Burn Book yesterday.
What I love more than anything else is opening up for nominations to the Burn Book.
Wait,
I
yes,
think that's amazing.
Yeah, guys, please, if you ever feel passionate about your hatred for someone, tell me. I want to know who you hate. And we'll put them in the Burn Book together. Nothing brings people together quite like shared hatred.
It's so true. Talking shit about somebody else is the best team building activity ever.
I have some ideas for the Avs.
The 2022 team is better, but Nathan MacKinnon now is better than he was then. Megan, I think you're spot on. And I think that is so. Look, I know the first one and maybe two are a little bit tainted, and I'm not, disagreeing with that. But I want to talk about the Blackhawks Cups in 10, 12, and 15, somewhere in there, 3 and 6 years. And I think about how those all went, because we remember them by the end being this kind of dominant for specifically the lockout shortened season, where it took them 22, 23 games to even lose a game. And then even still, it was, overtime, all that stuff. And it's this really dominant force. And I think we think about that sometimes, but all three of those cup wins for the Blackhawks were made very differently. And I think about that for the Avs this year, because I do think that we in the media, fans, even, at the national level, we think about that 2022 team and how dominant they were. And we kind of think about that as oh, well, that's what it takes to win a Stanley Cup. And no, it takes everything coming together in the right way, and that looks different for different teams. And so while this team maybe doesn't feel as dominant the way they did a couple of years ago, well, it's just the way that some of the Blackhawks Cups didn't feel as dominant as they did in that lockout shortened season. And it takes different parts coming together in the right way. And I think what makes me feel confident about this team's ability to get there, despite them, I agree with you, not being as good as that team from a few years ago, is your higher end is somehow higher now than it was then. And Nathan MacKinnon has been through that grind and understands that it takes more than just him filling the net for them to get to the top of the mountain. And I do think he's a more complete player now. And I think Cale Makar is a more complete player now. He wasn't killing penalties 3 years ago. He's one of their primary penalty killers now. The D-corps, which we considered to be one of the best defensive corps in the NHL 3 years ago. Well, with that Sam Girard injury, you had Bowen Byram playing up, and you had the law firm of Johnson & Johnson on your third pair, which they played really well. But assuming you get some health back here and Josh Manson comes back and Sam Girard doesn't break his chest in the second round of the playoffs, Megan, there's a chance that your D-corps is a little bit deeper this time around. Eric Johnson, that guy that you had as a staple of your third pairing, well, he's actually your number 7 if you're fully healthy. And so, I do think that there's little parts of this roster that you look at and you say, well, maybe it's not better overall, but it's more, this area is more complete. This area is more elite. This area is more dynamic. Like, I think there's different shades to the team this year than it didn't have a few years ago. That maybe top to bottom is it as good? No, but are there key areas where you can make the argument that this team has a more well-rounded look? Yeah, I think you could definitely make that argument.
With health, I think the
Yes.
back end is a very interesting conversation, because if there is some combination of Manson, Girard, Taves, Makar, Lindgren, Belinsky, did I already say Girard?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Eric Johnson's then floating around in there somewhere. And you've got Keaton Middleton as a guy waiting in the balance too. It becomes interesting because of what the combination of Lindgren, Manson, and Girard represent.
Yeah.
It just means somehow, the bottom 4 of however that D-corps shakes out is going to be stronger than the bottom 4 of the 2022 team. Because what Johnson & Johnson were as a third pairing was a little bit steady, a little bit reliable, but you can, if it's a Malinsky, let's just say, who's on the third pairing, you can account for maybe a little bit more production to come from that. And I think he's rounded out the defensive side of his game. Bowen Byram had 9 points in 20 games. And I know that doesn't sound like much. I recall him being on the doorstep of significantly more chances than that.
Yep.
That didn't
2 crossbars
finish.
in particular that stick out of my head. Yep.
So he was very much a part of the action and actually led the team in ice time in Game 6 in the St. Louis series. And so I think the steps that Malinsky has taken to absorb more minutes throughout the year, it's not going to be a direct translation to what Byram provided for the Avs in the playoffs. But I think it's because what Byram provided is going to be made up for in what a Malinsky and a Lindgren provide, because a Lindgren is a clear upgrade over the Johnson committee. And so similarly then together, what a Malinsky and a Lindgren, I don't even know if that ends up being the pair. It kind of seems like Bednar like Lindgren and Manson together. And the Sams have been doing interesting things, but also Lindgren and Malinsky have been doing interesting things. I just feel a confidence that, again, the bottom 4 on the back end might be better now, health permitting. It's a very huge qualifier that has to be true, because it does get a little scary after that drop-off. But honestly, it would have been a little bit scary after the drop-off in the 2022 team too.
Because of the injury, and you had Jack Johnson in, if you went one more injury, you were going to your Black Aces, Look, I don't want to undersell. Let me see your glass. What Bowen Byram did I'm forcing this on you. I don't know if you wanted more, but I'm forcing it on you. I don't want to undersell what Bowen Byram did in 2022 for the Avs. I believe, I don't have, but you said he was the time on ice leader in Game 6 of the Blue Series. I think he was also up there in Game 6 of the Cup clinching game, where he was, among the team's ice time leaders. I'm not saying that Sam Malinski is going to do that, but Megan, Sam Malinski is playing better and better every night.
I liked his game against Calgary. I liked Lindgren's game a lot too, in his own end especially. I see there are flashes of what Byram was, and the difference is the following year, Byram kind of fell out of favor with Bednar a little bit in terms of trust and utilization. And it feels like Malinski's getting through that part of the relationship in his last year and a big chunk of it this year. I think those growing pains that a young defenseman experiences with his hard-nosed coach, Malinski's gotten out of his system. He's a little more maturity, just being a little bit older as well. And, the issue with Byram was like trying to get him to play on his offside. You've just got a natural righty in Sam as it is. So I think that with Malinski, we kind of leaped over some of those hurdles that Byram was experiencing in the year after the Cup that will prove very beneficial in a playoff run from the perspective of trust.
I pulled my phone up and then I saw a fun text from Blake, our boss, which I'll share with you after the show.
Perfect. He's like, why are you guys drinking Prosecco?
Well, and actually the funniest part is he started the text with, hey, don't read this while you're on the show. But then I read the rest of it and I was like, well, how could I not read this while I'm on the show?
I love Joseph's comment in the chat. EJ EJ for depth is also perfect.
EJ is also perfect.
Because I don't want to get carried away, but I can't help but feel that even the strength of play in a player like Malinski, having a guy like Eric Johnson working with the defenseman every day is beneficial too. That is an experienced player who had the pedigree, like the style of play that Eric Johnson played earlier in his career can help teach Sam Malinski now some things.
It was unique to Eric Johnson at the time back in 2006, 2008. Somewhere in there, wherever
I don't deal with numbers.
2006.
I'm more of a feel girl. Felt like it happened around then.
Early 2000s.
Ross Colton around analytics. He's like, yeah, I kind of pay attention, but I'm more of a feel guy. Same.
Yeah.
No numbers for me.
It was unique when Eric Johnson was drafted. Now it's kind of the expectation. You got to be able to get up ice and move the puck and things like that. So I think you're right. But, again, and I think very highly of Bowen Byram, both in our interactions with him and him as a player. I never had a bad interaction with Bowen.
No, he was actually one of the best.
Yes. Yeah. So
hilarious.
I'm not trying to find reasons to say why Bowen Byram was lesser than or whatever, but Sam Malinski, he's always been a productive player, but he was never like a runaway offensive, like dynamo on the back end. He's always needed to have a well-rounded game. Again, I think Bowen Byram is kind of like Gerard in that he didn't always get as much credit as he maybe deserved for being a stout defender, not just like an offensive presence. But I do feel like there's the potential for Sam Malinski to, if he continues to elevate his game, that you could end up in a second round where it's like, yeah, we have high levels of trust in Sam Malinski on both ends of the ice. I mean, Megan, you said it a minute ago, we kind of breezed past it. I thought he was great last night. In a game that the Avs let a 2-goal lead slip away and lose in a shootout, I thought Sam Malinski was a big bright spot, and I thought he was doing things on both sides of the puck that are making you look at it like, yeah, this is a second pairing guy in the future. You and I talked to him last week, and he openly admitted, like, I wasn't ready for how much more of a grind this season was going to be versus what I've done in the past, college and the American League. And so, like, he outright admitted to you and I, like, yep, big learning lesson this year, but I have a better understanding of it. I was able to get my batteries rested, recharged, and I'm back at it. And I think we're seeing the real true life trajectory of Sam Malinski here, post Four Nations break of like, yeah, we're seeing some of the potential that the Avs are hoping to tap into with him.
Yeah.
As early as this playoffs.
I think his maturity as a player too is how he's able to translate the messaging that he's getting to round out his game into actual results that have now been more and more consistent. If I'm not mistaken too, I don't know that St. Louis was his strongest game, but he followed it up with a good game against Calgary. And so I do think we talk about floor to ceiling, and I do think he's shoring that up to be
Took the words out of my
not
mouth.
as low of a floor, and the ceiling is just getting higher. And I even look at a player like Byram, whose trajectory was impacted by injury. And so
Big time.
the playoffs were kind of his breakout moment where we really got to see what we knew he was capable that whole time, but couldn't fully realize. And in a different way, that's my hope for a player like Malinsky too, that there's just more to offer that we haven't even seen. And I think that can be true of a couple of the guys between a Lindgren and a Malinsky and a Girard, who was robbed of his 2022 playoff run because of an injury.
Can you see, could we see Sam Malinsky take that next step? Because the part that has impressed me about him since coming out of the Four Nations break is it would have been easy to assume that this was the time of year where his game would start to, shrink a little bit because the intensity and the expectation and the pace and everything ramps up. And it's been the opposite, where in fact, I think his game has started to shine more. And then I was just going to make the comment of you and I's favorite line that we've ever gotten out of the locker room that we go back to all the time. If you can't bring your A game, bring your B game. Sam Malinsky is figuring out how to always bring his B game at least.
Yeah.
And I think that was where we saw a lot of the fluctuation. And that was also, in my opinion, the change that we saw in Bo and Byram in that playoffs in 2022 was he didn't have bad games anymore. He found a way to be effective, contribute, even if it wasn't on the score sheet. He found a way to be involved every night. And I think that's what Sam Malinsky's starting to learn.
Yeah. Byram really handled that moment well in stepping up when the team needed him to. And I think Malinsky going through a little bit of a tough stretch after such a promising start and working his way out of it. I won't use the word easily, but it just took the Four Nations reset and he was fine. Whereas we've watched players like Ross Colton and Casey Middlestat experience struggles that they never have before in their career. It's hard to just get out of a rut. And so I think it says a lot about Malinsky to be able to pull himself out of a period of hockey where he was less than pleased with his performance. And
be honest with himself.
Yeah, be honest and then channel that into something productive, into real change that is earning you trust with your coach. That's where I think Byram being able to step up in a big moment and absorbing bigger minutes in the playoffs is huge. And it gives me confidence that's rooted in something real for a player like Malinsky to handle himself in that stage too.
Well, and then just to pump Malinsky's tires a little bit
this
more.
This is the Sam Malinsky pod now.
Yeah. He was a healthy scratch for several games behind Keaton Middleton. And that's not meant to be a sideswipe at Keaton Middleton, but like when you're looking at pedigree and what you brought them here to do and all that stuff, like you want Sam Malinsky playing ahead of Keaton Middleton. He could have let that crater him. And I'm a healthy scratch and they don't even think I'm any good and I might get waived and I might, he could have taken that and really let it drag him down and derail. But no, he took that as I have things I got to do better. I got to work on my consistency. I got to work on being more reliable. I got to be more trustworthy for Jared Bednar. And he's channeled all that in the right way.
Yeah.
And I think that is the part that is, forget his on-ice results. That's the part to me that makes me believe the most in what Sam Malinsky can be. Is that he's a mature player who's able to take feedback and I don't want to say punishment, but a lesson from a strict coach who has championship aspirations and expectations and channel it into something positive and not let it turn into something that is a negative and that takes Sam Malinsky out of the things that make him successful. And I think that is, for me, so like I said, what instills the most confidence that he is going to come out the other side.
And just adding one more layer, having your name come up in trade rumors around the deadline.
Yeah.
To be able to add that as another part of the outside noise that you're trying to tune out and just focus on what you can do better is huge.
And I mean, I don't think we ever talked about Sam Malinsky being traded on the show, but when you and I discuss it privately or, anything like that, saying discuss it privately always makes it sound like you're like,
when we were sitting with Chris McFarland and I said, you should get Brock Nelson and Charlie Coyle and Tanev.
But keep Sam Malinsky. But no, you and I did always talk about that. I really did. I felt like had they moved Sam Malinsky at this year's deadline, it would have been a mistake because I just think there's so much potential there that is yet to be tapped into. And what we've seen coming out of the Four Nations break has made me double down on my belief for that.
Yeah, I think the organization realizes that they struck a little bit of gold in what they have with him, and they don't want to part ways with it too easily.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we've covered a lot on the back end comparisons from Cup year to now, but I like the note too about a player like Cale Makar because I also agree that I think Cale Makar in 2025 is better than 2022.
Yeah.
And the tough part has been the last two exits for Colorado. I felt that way similarly, that a Nathan MacKinnon and a Cale Makar deserved a better fate, Mikko Rantanen formerly.
Right.
And so it's been things that have sort of slipped out of their fingers, a little bit of injury, misfortune too, right? Losing an Andrew Cogliano in the Seattle series and losing a Val Nichushkin, of course.
Yeah.
Those were all very difficult things to overcome. But lost in that is, I think that Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon have only become more special.
So I know you were starting to gear up for us to move on, but because there's a name that you said there, Val Nichushkin. I also think Val Nichushkin now is a significantly better player than he was in 2022.
I like this.
And there were players on both teams that made mention after the fact, whether it be through podcasts, interviews, various things like that, including Jared Bednar, that have said there's a good chance that Val Nichushkin was the best player in the Stanley Cup final. The last 2 years, the Avs have had disappointing exits, and who's been missing from the lineup? Other than Gabe Landeskog, Val Nichushkin.
9 goals, 6 assists, 15 points in those 20 games for the Avs in that Stanley Cup playoff run.
I believe, and I could be a little wrong on this, and people on the internet will let me know, I believe Val Nichushkin still finished top 5 in goal scoring last year in the playoffs, despite not playing.
No, I think that's true.
Since whatever it was, game 2 in the second round.
God, I remember that being a very sad stat because we had known he was gone and he was still among some of the point leaders into past, future rounds because of how dominant
conference finals. Yes.
Yeah. The Winnipeg series was.
I'm fairly certain that he finished round 2 as the league leader in goals, despite not playing most of round 2. I said this on a podcast right after the Mikko Rantanen trade, and I want to again say this. I maybe think more highly of Mikko Rantanen than anyone else than any other media person in the NHL. I think Mikko Rantanen is an outstanding player. I think he's an elite goal scorer, and I think better than all that, he's a better person. So I think very highly of Mikko Rantanen. But for a long time, the last couple of seasons, I have wondered aloud, hey, when they're both healthy and they're both in the lineup, are we sure Val Nichushkin isn't better than Mikko Rantanen? Are we sure he's not more valuable to this team than Mikko Rantanen? If Val Nichushkin stays in the lineup for the Avs, we all know what I'm referring to. I'm not going to use the word healthy. If he stays in the lineup for the Avs, I think that is an X factor that we can't measure right now because we don't know what the value of Val Nichushkin at the current height of his powers being healthy and in the lineup. We don't know what that looks like relative. We got a glimpse of it in 2022 when everyone said he may have been the best player in that series.
Right.
He's better than that now. So if he stays healthy, damn it, I just did it. I said I wasn't going to use the word healthy. If he stays in the lineup, how does that change things for this Avs group? How much more dangerous does that make them than we're even calculating for? And I just don't know.
I think it's a solid point, and I want to take a second. I don't have it in front of me, but I want to know what his points pace would have been if he had played a full season this year. And that's unfair, but I am just curious how it stacks up with some of the regular seasons that the other players were having in their cup year, because the Gabe Landeskog of it all is also important in this conversation. Like if we are going,
You said he's got 30 points right now, right?
yes.
Okay.
If we're going line by line, you've got the three-headed monster, three-headed monster, big egos. No, but Mikko Rantanen, a part of that, right? 5 goals, 20 assists in 20 games. I'm not trying to draw a direct parallel to Necas, but obviously that's how the trade shakes out. I don't think that Necas alone is meant to replace single-handedly Mikko Rantanen's impact in the playoffs, but Mikko Rantanen, as much as he would frustrate you, he did sneakily pick up points along the way. So Necas has a little bit to prove then in the postseason the way that Mikko Rantanen did. And I don't mind if the way that he contributes, maybe the overall number is lesser, but you feel he has more of a direct impact on the production. Whereas sometimes it felt like Mikko Rantanen was an assist merchant, just kind of collecting. But it takes highly skilled players to make plays too. I don't want to sell Mikko Rantanen short in that, right? But in 59 playoff games, 30 points for Necas. 11 goals, 19 assists, compared to Mikko Rantanen's 25 points in the cup run specifically.
Yep.
With the three-headed monster, though, another important thing to mention.
Mikko, I was always in the camp of you deal with the negative of Mikko Rantanen because he just produces every night. To your point, if you can get to a point with Marty Necas of, okay, well, you're not having to put up with the negative, even if he doesn't produce it necessarily the same clip. If you're getting away from that, again, using this term very loosely, negative of the way that Mikko Rantanen would feel like he'd sometimes kind of float through playoff games. I still can't believe that through all of this, the Avs are going to end up playing Mikko Rantanen in the first round of the playoffs. Yeah, I don't know, but Marty Necas has something to prove here as well. There's a real sentiment from the Carolina side of things that one of his drawbacks is that he would disappear when things ratcheted up and he wouldn't get to the interior of the ice, and he was a perimeter player, and Jared Bednar is not going to stand for that. He's not as effortlessly productive as a guy like Mikko Rantanen. Marty Necas is going to have to earn it. And if he can find a way to earn even something close to what Mikko Rantanen produced in the playoffs, I think you're going to end up with a player that you're really happy with. And Val Nichushkin is on pace for just shy of a 70-point season over 82 games.
Okay, that's actually comparable to where Jonathan Drouin would have finished too if he had stayed healthy the whole season. And I know maybe it's like, well, this is why you just don't do points projection because It's a little bit of a gamble. But I think it's safe to say in seeing the games that Drouin and Nichushkin have been in, the difference they make is pretty clear.
Yeah.
In the bottom line. And so I feel a confidence that these players are going to be a big impact in a playoff run. And similarly, Artturi Lehkonen thought he was great in the cup run, and he had some game-breaking moments for them. So in the way that we'll talk about a JT Compher as being kind of a clutch player.
Do you have Lecky's point total pulled up for that playoffs?
Let's see. I think I have it somewhere later in this list here. Lehkonen, 16. That's his contributions after he got to the team.
If not, I'm gonna try to pull it up real quick.
Perfect.
But he's another player, Megan, that I think is better now than he was 3 years ago.
Easily, he's exceeded his regular season career high in this season, kind of quietly, and he was a huge impact.
He's
in
almost
the cup
a 30-goal guy. I know there's only 7 games to go, but he could end up as a 30-goal guy.
And so you look at what Lehkonen was able to do for them in the cup run. He clinched the sweep over Edmonton in the Western Conference Final with an overtime goal, and he scored the series-winning goal in Game 6 of the Cup Final. Lehkonen has come up in big moments. Huge. I think that's true of the regular season this year, too. That has been a sneaky component of Lehkonen. He's clutch light, like a JT Compher, but a higher upside, I think, a better fit in a top 6. And we already saw how he helped them in 2022. I think he can help them more in 2025.
8 goals, 14 points for Lecky in 2022's playoffs.
I think he can easily exceed that because now the opportunity is even more elevated.
I would say the expectation is for him to exceed that even because of the way that he's elevated his play.
I think that's pretty safe to say. And then the Jonathan Drouin part's interesting. That's a new piece that we can't compare to from the
Mhm.
Cup run year, but I think his two-way game improved in ways that maybe when you think of what he can do in the playoffs doesn't get enough credit. But I imagine the way in which he complements Nathan MacKinnon, because not having Landeskog to fill out the top 6 picture, it does make a huge difference.
Huge.
Even with how it comes
Huge.
together right now with players like Duren and Lehkonen in the mix. Now Brock Nelson playing up there with them. It still feels like it's left a pretty big hole side by side. It doesn't feel quite as strong, even with players like Duren helping to round it out.
It's I think the 2022 team was more offensively dynamic. This team feels more well-rounded to me.
So here's where it gets interesting, because Burakovsky made things a little bit weird in that he kind of finished as a third line player, so you're measuring his production as one.
Yep.
And when you go side by side,
Yep.
then
Yep.
the production that the Avs have gotten from their third line would be worrisome
For
this
sure.
year comparatively. But I actually think side by side, just in looking at the numbers, they've gotten a little bit more from their bottom 6 this year than the whole of the bottom
Just
6 in the Cup
overall,
year.
yeah.
Overall, just because players like Helm, Cogliano, what they did wasn't necessarily production.
Well, and Berkey, to your point, he kind of ended up as a third line guy, but he played so much of that season in the top 6, and it was kind of like when they got healthy and the dust kind of settled and Gabe Landeskog came back, that was kind of where he ended up. I want to park a quick 2 seconds. One of my most clear, vivid memories of the 2022 run was watching Berkey put that puck through the net against Nashville, because right away he shot it, and I looked out on my computer to start typing that he had scored, and the play kept going, and I was like, well, what the hell just happened? And the horn goes off and he shot it through the net. That's just one of my very clear
That
memories.
was such a crazy, zany moment.
Yes, yeah. But I just wanted to make sure every time someone mentions Andre Burakovsky, that's the shot that goes through my head.
How many points do you think he had in 20? Well, he didn't play the full 20 games, obviously.
In the playoffs?
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, because he had 61 in the regular season.
Right. He had a hot regular season, very much more so than what we're looking at with a Ross Colton, right?
Yep.
Who I'm kind of making his player comp.
Yep. I'm going to guess, since you're asking, it's not very impressive. Man, I'm trying to run through, because there weren't a lot of games that year. There's only 20 games that year.
He only played in 12.
Woo! Oh, man.
Which actually makes the number feel
8 points?
8 points is perfect. 3 goals, 5 assists, and he did have the OT winner.
Nailed it! Yes,
in game 1 against Tampa. So I want to measure to the game-breaking moments for these players and add a little more weight to them, so maybe the points don't totally jump off the page, but moments matter.
I've had just enough of this, and I'm in a nostalgic mood.
Hell yeah.
That his overtime goal, Burakovsky, it was such a nice pass from Val Nichushkin that I remember thinking that JT Compher must have run into Andre Vasilevsky, because it was a wide open net for Andre Burakovsky. And I just remember thinking, like, when the puck first went in, I looked at the ref, and then I looked at John Cooper to see if he was looking down at the monitor. I was like, well, there's no way Andre Vasilevsky was just that out of position, but he was, because it was that nice of a play. Wow, 8 points. See, and that's where I think you do have the conversation, Megan, of like, the Avs can replicate, like Charlie Coyle can replicate that.
That's where I feel such a passion for Charlie Coyle. I genuinely feel in my heart that what Coyle and Colton can do together is just a dam waiting to burst. I see so many flashes in the games they've gotten in together.
Add Gabe there. Gabe there, and your mind
just... It's such a missing piece too. Like, we just haven't seen the full potential of what this third line can be.
With all due respect to Joel Kiviranta, I know Megan doesn't like him very much as a player.
Whoa, no. Joel Kiviranta rules. But it does feel like it's just kind of
Ruel's Kiviranta
is Jared Bednar said, well, it's nothing special in terms of what he does specifically for that third line because he's just very versatile. That's an awesome thing to be, though.
Yes.
So full love to Kivi Ranta, but they're just missing a little something on that third line. And in the same way that Kivi Ranta was a different player in the Winnipeg series than we'd seen at any point in that regular season. I think he's built upon what he did in the playoffs in this regular season. I just wonder if there's another level for Kivi and or if, a Landeskog on the wing of that third line. It just, the potential for what it could be feels like it only gets better from here.
Yeah.
Whether that is playoff Kivi stunting on these hoes
or
or Gabe Landeskog coming back.
I mean, and look, none of this is
I didn't mean to call anybody hoes. I'm so sorry.
I wish you would call more people hoes, Megan. We don't talk enough about the people that are hoes out there.
Blake Coleman.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
You know what? I'm going to move past that one. So I was going to run with it, but I asked Kivi 2 weeks ago, I think it was in Montreal. I said, with the amount of competition that there is in the bottom part of this lineup now post deadline, is that any extra motivation for you? And he goes, look, I don't think we need any extra motivation on this team, but I do wonder if it sounds like he's potentially coming back on this 3-game trip they got coming up here.
Yeah.
Going with the team, as you reported this morning. So, he could finish with more than 16 goals. Another spam call, if you can believe it.
I love this take, actually. Kivi Ranta, career high.
Could be, career. But where I'm going, I don't know if you'll love where I'm going with this.
You're going to...
Let's say he gets... Let's say this is... We're getting crazy with it here.
Let's say Kivi Ranta.
Let's say Gabe comes back and you healthy scratch Yoel Kivi Ranta for game 1. How much more of a fire does that light under him, knowing that he's now got to go beat out Parker Kelly and Logan O'Connor? Logan O'Connor is a Jared Bednar favorite, won a Stanley Cup with Jared Bednar.
He's playing some of his best hockey of the season right now.
Right now, he's right in the middle of it. Parker Kelly, as shown by last night, taking that massive hit, looking pretty dazed, and still finishing the shift and making a good play. You've got legitimate competition to beat out. And suddenly, if you've got Logan O'Connor playing great, Parker Kelly playing great, Yoel Kivi Ranta playing great, all competing for ice time, you know who wins there? The Avs. And so, that is just one of those things that we talk about players, quality players that were healthy scratched 3 years ago. If, and it's still a huge if, he skated on consecutive days today, but it's still a huge if. If Gabe Landeskog comes back in that first round, you've suddenly got players who are playing their best hockey, fighting to just be in the lineup. And I think that's a good thing for the Avs and this coaching staff.
It is. That's where I feel the strength of this team sneakily became their depth. The players that are waiting in the balance, because Nico Sturm, Abe Kubel, they did play in the playoffs for the Avs in 2022. And I think it's worth noting that waiting in the balance for this year's team in terms of depth, you've got a Miles Wood and a Jimmy Vesey who are NHL regulars on the teams that they've come from. And I think they can make more of a difference than an Abe Kubel or Nico Sturm. And, those were guys that were called upon. It's a long way in the path to the cup. And we both believe this can be an even tougher challenge in the sense that the competition is even steeper, but also that the Avs, they're going to rely on everybody a little bit more than before. Everyone kind of needs to be this best case scenario version of themselves. And I have a lot of faith that there are guys trending in the right direction at the best time of year or having career seasons or just continuing to be impressive like Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar. That's why I'm putting my faith in them. But it is an interesting part of it. I do think the depth that's waiting is a little bit better. We talked about Burakovsky's contributions and how we feel all right between Coyle and Colton. I think that they can provide a similar impact. JT Compher, he finished with 5 goals and 8 points in the playoffs, but he had some pretty game-breaking moments. I'm sure we remember 2 goals in Game 6 to help clinch the win over the Blues and the game-winning goal in Game 3 to give the Avs a stronghold in the series sweep over Edmonton.
And that goal right there was... This is going to sound silly. That goal was when I knew the Avs were going to win the Stanley Cup. His third goal, his goal in game 3 to put the Avs up against Edmonton, because he came out of the box.
Yes.
And he just, so I'm going to tell a little bit of a backstory here. My parents are huge Colorado Avalanche fans. My family moved here the year before the Avs. If you've followed me on my media journey, you've heard this story before. My family moved here the year before the Avs got to Denver. And when the Avs showed up, we moved from a state that didn't have any pro sports teams. So suddenly this team was here and they were good and they were on a championship run. And it made my family, my parents in particular, because I was really little, it made them feel really connected with the city. So my parents are huge Avs fans from day one. And for so many years in the 2010s, when the Avs were bad and when they were trying to climb out of it, and even under some of the early, Jared Bednar years, my dad would always say, the Avs look like little boys out there. They get pushed around. When, it comes time, they just get moved right off the puck and they don't win any battles, and that they'll never win a Stanley Cup if they can't win those battles. And I'll never forget, JT Compher comes out of the box. He's racing for a puck, and with one hand just shoves Evan Bouchard down to the ice. Like, this is my puck, little boy. I'm going to go in on this breakaway now. And I picked up my phone immediately and texted my dad from Edmonton. And I said, they're not little boys anymore. And that was, it was just one of those moments where it's like, yeah, this is a mature, grown, veteran team that is ready to take these steps. I don't fully remember what the point with all this was, but you mentioned JT Compher in those big moments.
Yes.
And that was just one that he was involved in a moment where I remember thinking like, yeah, this team's going to win because they've taken that next step.
I do think it's important because JT Compher also had a good regular season, at least a personal best for him going into it, and then came up huge in big moments for the Avs in the playoffs. So when I say the 2025 Avs are counting on best case scenario, they are looking then for a JT Compher type player to step up in big moments. I think that quietly, Lehkonen or Kiviranta have had those types of moments in the regular season that those will be players that I'm looking at outside of the regular cast of characters I'm expecting to do it. Because outside of that, I think this fourth line is intriguing. I think that the experience of the 2022 fourth line, only Logan O'Connor and Jack Drury have playoff experience under their belt. Parker Kelly doesn't have NHL playoff experience. And even then, the combined playoff games for both of those players, it's not a huge number. I had it somewhere in here.
It's like something like 29 games.
24 games for Drury, 31 for OC.
Okay. All right. So that's more well-balanced than I thought you were going to say.
So understandably for Helm and Cogliano, that's a different overall number.
Yeah.
And Logan O'Connor has gone to the school of Cogliano and Helm. So I think that he's a great teacher for Drury and for Kelly to be these players. And I don't have a lack of confidence in them, but I do think that experience will be an interesting aspect of how this fourth line does differ from the 2022 fourth line. But I also think the ways in which it can be different, maybe there is more of an offensive impact that they can have in addition to just being such a hassle to play against, being so difficult to play against that they wear teams down, they exhaust them, and then you send the top line out and they do great things.
And you know where I think they make that experience up this year, Megan, is with Charlie Coyle and Ross Colton. I think you're just moving that up from the fourth line to the third line. And I actually think, I think, talking about Lehkonen and Kiviranta kind of coming up in those big moments, and Avs fans know Kiviranta can show up in a big moment in the playoffs.
It's kind of a special little thing about him.
It's a thing about him. But this maybe feels like the easy, low-hanging fruit answer, but you know who I think takes the place of JT Compher clutch goals from your depth?
Devon Toews.
Oh, I like that answer too. It's Charlie Coyle.
Okay, I like that answer more because we haven't gotten to really see it yet.
Right.
But I believe in it because we have this track record of what Charlie Coyle has been on his other teams and how valued he was in Boston for a reason. I'm not going to give that no weight I think it's significant. I think we haven't even begun to see the impact he can have. And I think the way that Jared Bednar uses him is a reflection of why we should give him a little more credit for what he can do for this team in the playoffs. In overtime situations, Charlie Coyle, though new to this team, is being put out there. Brock Nelson, another one that I think is quietly the experience is going to be a huge piece in all of this.
Yep.
It's interesting, the version of Nazem Kadri that we got in 2022, it took shaping for him to be that player. I think Brock Nelson doesn't maybe have quite the ceiling as 2022 Nazem Kadri, but I think that floor, it's a raised floor. The room for error is going to be smaller and more responsible.
Well, and I just think that guys like Charlie Coyle, guys like Brock Nelson are going to be getting their most comfortable by the time these playoffs start here in 2-3 weeks. It's part of the argument that I hear people make every year about moving the deadline up earlier in the season. And what we heard Chris McFarland tell us after the Mikko Rantanen trade, like, we made this deal now so that these major pieces that, we just moved out Mikko Rantanen, bringing two, big time players back in, they have time to get acclimated. By the time the playoffs roll around, they feel comfortable. I think Brock Nelson, Charlie Coyle are going to be hitting that stride right around round one and just kind of going from there. So no, I think you're right. I think it's, maybe Brock Nelson isn't going to be Nazem Kadri from 3 years ago, but can he help provide some added punch? Yes. Can Charlie Coyle maybe be JT Compher plus? I think there's a good chance.
I think Ross Colton's had a funky year too. And in knowing what Ross Colton's pedigree is on a championship caliber team in Tampa, and then getting the full runway of adjusting to the Avs last year. And honestly, when he was playing down the middle, it wasn't perfect, but by the end of that year, he'd settled into it nicely. You don't even need him to do that now. You've got Charlie Coyle. He's made better on the wing. We saw a little bit of that earlier this year in the top six when he was playing alongside players like MacKinnon. Ross Colton's sick. So
yeah, he is.
I think that Ross Colton's another player who has had a weird year, and I think we're going to see a very different version of him in the playoffs because he handles those moments really well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and EJ told me yesterday at Morning Skate, like, there's a lot of players in that room who have played in big games, who have gone deep in the playoffs, who have won Stanley Cups. There's not going to be anything that rattles this group. And the other thing I was going to say all the way back at the start, so I apologize, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit here. We were talking about how, there's so much parity in the league and the teams are, the West is so deep. And I include the Avs in this. I think every team is flawed though, Megan. I think all of these teams that are even the real contenders, I think they're all flawed. And I think the Avs are a team with experience, guys that have played in big games, and they're going to be able to help overcome those flaws and patch over them. And when those flaws start to show their head and things start to go a little bit off the rails, the Avs have a lot of experience in that room that's going to be able to help get them back on track, stay focused, not be overwhelmed by the moment. And I think that that's something that we can't undervalue when talking about guys like Ross Colton. He's scored a cup clinching goal before. The Avs have two guys on this roster who have scored the goal to win a Stanley Cup. And that's experience you can't put a price tag on.
No, and I'm looking back at the success of the 2022 team. They needed all the guys who were really good in the regular season to continue to be good, and that is certainly true. But they got a little bit of something from everywhere at some point.
Yeah.
Like the Game 6 St. Louis moment. Was it Helm from EJ from OC? Am I misremembering it?
It was Makar, EJ, OC, Helm.
It ends with the guys that maybe you don't expect to be a part of that moment being a part of it.
Would you like to hear again? I'm just reminiscent enough that all this stuff is coming back.
No, I want it. I think it's really cathartic for fans to relive some of this.
I remember being in the press box in St. Louis, I got a great press box. The city of St. Louis, the press box at the Enterprise Center is top notch. We were in the press box. I was sitting next to our good buddy D-Mac from over at Altitude. And I remember when Cale Makar was circling behind the net with whatever 15 seconds left, D-Mac told me, he said, there's still time. And I just remember doing a quick survey of who was on the ice. And my thought was, what a weird choice of guys to go with in this moment. Is this Jared Bednar being safe, making sure they don't give anything up silly? Oh, wow, that's a nice head of steam Eric Johnson has. Wow, what a great placement. Logan O'Connor put that puck for Darren Helm to skip. Wow, it's in the back of the net. Oh, my gosh. And that was the progression of my thoughts, was how interesting that he's going with these guys all the way to they've won the game. And it was just a trust thing. Looking back on it now, it's like those are the guys that he trusted the most to take care of the last 15 seconds of the game, whether it be defending their own net or, marching up ice. And that's where, we talk so much about trust with Jared Bednar. It's those little moments of him having his finger on the pulse of the team and understanding who, not always your best players, but who are the right players to put out in these moments. And the more players that Jared Bednar feels like are the right players, opens up the opportunity for those types of moments even more.
Yeah, I think there are guys on this current version of the Avs who can be that, and maybe even more options in terms of guys who can be that. And I'm excited to see where it goes. There's 7 games left in the season, so I don't want to get too carried away. I think the other part of this conversation that we didn't touch on as much, but definitely discussed around, was Brock Nelson, Nazem Kadri.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fair to say that the impact that Nazem Kadri had for the cup winning team, it's just objectively better.
Oh, man!
Mike!
Oh, man! Mike!
Certainly not, Mike.
Let's do it. I'll run back down the street.
You guys don't understand how close this was to get this Prosecco. It was done in a matter of 10 minutes.
Mike, 10 minutes, just like the $10 that Mike just contributed.
Mike became a new member on our last pod. We are so glad to have you here. You've been in the chat for a while.
Mike.
Mike. I saw a license plate that said Miguel on my way here.
All right, I've got another. Again, I've just had enough of these.
So curious to see.
I don't know if the Avs are going to get mad at me for
I'm like, how does the Mike segue fit in here?
Now I'm even more excited. Do you know when I say Mike, do you know what that's from? The Geico commercial with the camel, Hump Day.
Okay, I know the hump. I remember that.
Yep. At one point in the commercial, he walks up to a guy in the office, goes, Mike. What day is it, Mike? And then it cuts. And the next thing, I don't remember what the woman's name is that he asks. Do you know what day it is? And she goes, it's Hump Day. He goes, whoop, whoop. That was the whoop whoop that the Avs used in arena for years and years and years.
I remember that.
It changed this year. It's a different whoop whoop for legal reasons.
Oh,
it's a different whoop whoop.
That feels harmless,
but
not as bad as us putting Blake Coleman in the burn book. Probably.
Whenever I think or hear about the Geico Hump Day commercial, I always think about the Avs and our guy Mike. Mike. Yeah.
He's like, and I'm unsubscribing
and turning the show off.
That's the end of this relationship.
But I tied it back to the Avs. It was the whoop whoop in arena for a long time.
That's so funny. Well, now that we're telling stories today, Miles was singing bands and Make Her Dance in the locker room. And I thought that was such a funny pull for a song.
All right.
Now we're just sharing.
Just doing this. Do you want to hear something really crazy about you even bringing that up? I was singing that song today.
Do you think you share a brain with Miles Wood?
I might. I can stop though.
Yeah, please. Whatever you're doing to him, stop. You're torturing him.
No, I meant I can stop on skates.
Oh.
I call Miles Wood Luis Mendoza all the time because he's all gas, no brakes. Alex Ovechkin and Jacob Chychrun sing that song to each other in the tunnel before games, before warm-ups. And there's been videos of it going around. So I wonder if Miles Woods saw the same videos that I did that made me walking around this morning as I was getting a pacemaker. Because Alex Ovechkin and Jacob Chikrin sing it to each other in the hallway.
That's interesting because he even was singing it in like kind of a weird voice.
I wonder if he was doing like a half Russian accent.
Right now, I wonder if that's what it was.
Yeah.
Just a really weird song choice.
We've been going for over an hour, but I noticed you looking at the bottom of your glass there. Do you need more?
No, I don't need more. I want to make sure we covered our 2022-2025 comparison. The only thing we also didn't really get to, and I feel bad, we just glossed over how amazing Nazem Kadri was. So a moment of silence for how good Nazem Kadri was. He's not, dude. Okay. Goaltending.
Yep.
Darcy Kemper in the regular season was amazing.
Yeah,
I am not
he was
trying to undersell that.
He was outstanding.
He was okay, and understandably okay. He had his eye taken out by Ryan Johansson, as you mentioned, but the Avs needed just good enough goaltending. Because I mean, even Pavel Francouz in the Western Conference Final, though they swept, he was fallible too.
He had to be good.
Yeah.
There's a save in particular in Game 4 that he had to make on Connor McDavid.
We said the opposite thing just now. I said he was fallible, and you said he had to be good. And both are true.
Sorry.
Both are
Yes.
true. But what I want to say, it wasn't, like this stunning.
I got ahead of you. I thought you were going to be like, oh, it was. But no, you're completely right.
Stunning no notes for Pavel Francouz. No, but you're right. He was good when he had to be, but he didn't have to be that good.
Yep.
Kind of similar of Darcy Kemper. Like, he was good when he had to be, but he didn't have to be that good because the Avs were that dominant. I know Mackenzie Blackwood is untested. And I think that the same is true. Like, I'm not sure what playoff totals will look like, actually. Let's see here. Unless you happen to know off the top of your head.
Mackenzie Blackwood?
Or Scott Wedgwood is who I was gonna go for, because he's been with Dallas and
I believe
both through New Jersey.
I want to say that the Avs saw Scott Wedgwood for at least a portion of the bubble series against Dallas, but I could be way off base.
Well, don't you worry, we're gonna pull it up right
out
now.
I'm
what the
looking
playoff
at this
experience is.
As for Mackenzie Blackwood, because while I don't know the numbers, I know he doesn't have a lot of playoff games to his name.
3 for Scott Wedgwood in the NHL. He's had American League playoff experience, and for Mackenzie Blackwood, no NHL experience.
Really? I thought he played a few games with the Devils.
No.
Okay. So here's how I'm going to look at it. Or here's how I've been looking at it since they acquired Mackenzie Blackwood. Go prove it. He felt for a long time like he could be the guy in New Jersey. And when they started to get good, he fumbled a little bit. Well, you're on a cup contending team. What we've seen out of Mackenzie Blackwood this year has been exceptional. I really did. I felt like there was a long stretch there, and maybe not in the top 3 anymore, but I felt like he was putting himself into the Vezina conversation. Connor Hellebuyck's going to win it running away, but I thought Blackwood was at least putting himself in that top 3 finalist conversation. Mackenzie Blackwood has an opportunity for this to be his coming out party.
Interesting.
I'm an elite goaltender. Who did Scott Wedgwood say that Mackenzie Blackwood probably watches a lot of film of? Do you remember from our interviews last week?
Hold on. Was it Vasi?
It was.
Yeah, because he's a big guy who's very
athletic and mobile. I think now I caught a lot of flack for this earlier this week when I said it on
which
the
I
pod.
was surprised because I thought you were going to say a very different statement.
Yeah, people online did not like that I said that I think Andre Vasilevsky is the best goalie that's ever played. I know that's a big take, but Mike, where I'm going with this is Mackenzie Blackwood is one of the few players that I've seen that's even close to emulating what makes Vasilevsky as dominant as he is. I have never seen a goalie that big, that mobile, and that athletic the way that Vasilevsky is, and it's why I put him as what I think. And look, I grew up watching Patrick Waugh, so I don't say this lightly. The combination of size, speed, athleticism, mobility is what makes me put Vasilevsky in that tier. Mackenzie Blackwood is a guy who I see having some of those same tools. You can't teach size, so Blackwood's got the size. but for how big he is, the way he moves, how positionally sound he is, how reactionary he is, how athletic he is. There's not a lot of guys that have that same combination, and Vasilevsky is the cream of the crop for that. So it was something that really stuck out to me the other day when Scott Wedgwood told you and I, yeah, Blackie probably watches quite a bit of Vasilevsky tape. So I said, yeah, I see it the same way.
No, I think that's interesting because someone else in the chat here, I want to read it from you actually. There have been so many examples of goalies not having playoff experience and playing very good, from Joseph, Aiden Hill among them, and Aiden Hill too, a player that didn't necessarily have the showing in the league prior to the way that Mackenzie Blackwood has shown well, even with San Jose. I know there was some injury trouble in New Jersey previously, but Mackenzie Blackwood has shown well on lesser teams and has only come here and been very consistent in how good he is. Aiden Hill, obviously, we know the story of Vegas in that year, but a player without NHL playoff experience games, and even a Darcy Kemper, I think it was around 18 playoff games in total before coming to Colorado. And so I want to emphasize that point that playoffs and goalies, it's a little uncertain, like you have players like Bob in Florida who their playoff series is going to vary a little bit, and the mileage will vary even for the experienced goaltenders. And I think New York is learning, even with a Shesterkin and net, one of the best goaltenders in the league. They're fallible too. Connor Hellebuck, fallible.
Jordan Binnington, he's a guy that I believe you referred to him, and I'm sorry if I'm putting you on blast. I think you told me this while we were just talking. Jekyll and Hyde.
I said it live, and I'll say it again.
Okay, all right. But like Jordan Binnington is maybe the ultimate example of that, where it's just like if you told me that if it was Blues Jets round 1 and the Blues got swept 4-0 and Jordan Binnington gave up 6 goals in every game, I'd believe you. If you told me the Blues swept the Jets and Jordan Binnington gave up 2 goals across 4 games, I'd believe you. It is about playing your best hockey at the right time for goaltenders.
And that's why when you have a little bit of consistency in the regular season, we talk about floor to ceiling. I think that Mackenzie Blackwood, the variance between games and things dropping off is so minimal. I think you get the same guy on a nightly basis.
Well, and what else did Wedgie tell us the other day?
There aren't shootouts. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't say that. He didn't say that.
Wedgie talked about it, and actually Jared Bednar talked about it right before. This is a guy who expects that he make every save.
That is a sneaky thing too. It's not like media facing side of it. We see how hard he is on himself. So to hear that, I take a lot of mental note.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm just going to keep teasing the Wedgwood interview for a couple reasons. The first of being what a great job Mark and John did getting that set up.
I think that's why today Wedgwood's like, where is that being shown? And I said YouTube, and I think he was a little bit like, oh,
yeah.
YouTube?
I've done ESPN interviews that had less production than that. Yeah,
that production just felt a little bit like this is 30 for 30.
Where was I going with that?
Sorry, you were gonna tease Wedgwood.
Yep, talking about
something he.
Well, and Blackwood feeling like he should make every save. Damn, I got so hyped on Mark that I just forgot. Mark and John.
You guys are too good at your jobs.
I know.
You know what the 2022 Avs team didn't have?
Mark
behind
Seriously.
the camera to document it all.
Anytime Mark's not there, we walk into the room. Everyone's like, "Where's Mark? What do you guys?" And they look at us like we're bums. They're like,
Val won't even look at us unless Mark is there.
Go listen to the Wedgwood interview and you'll figure out what I'm talking about, probably.
We've gone long today, too. Do you have any final thoughts to round this out, wind it down?
Go watch the Wedgwood interview.
That's all I have to say as well. Scott Wedgwood, he was extremely generous with our time. We made him miss his lunch, and the Avs PR guy. Yeah. Shout out, Jared. Sorry for making you miss lunch as well.
You know what? I was actually going to poke fun at Gerard, but I'm not going to. Gerard's the best. Shout out Gerard.
Yeah, there's a lot of Jareds around the Avs, so
you gotta come up with your nicknames. No, I don't have anything else. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh my God, thank you so much. It's been a really fun show. Obviously, this comes down to the Avs proving that they're better than the 2022 team, and they have a tall task in front of them and a big road trip coming up to just continue to prove to all of us that they can be better.
I love it.
All right, everybody, we'll be back with some more coverage later this week. Avs are going on the road, but we'll still be covering this team every step of the way.
I'll just add this because I saw it in the chat earlier. We're not going on this road trip. We decided to forego the Midwest. But right now the plan is for us to be in California to end the season, and then we're there the rest of the way for playoffs. So there you go.
That's perfect. We've got some exciting Eagles coverage coming up with the debut of Taylor McCarr on the horizon. We want to be there for that as well. So stay tuned. Lots of cool stuff coming for you guys.
Bye.
Bye.